perspective now from someone who has survived a chemical weapons attack. Kasim Aid almost died in a sarin gas attack in Syria in 2013. He joins us from Washington. Hi, Kasim. Thank you for joining us on Sky News. First of all, tell us what happened to you.
Thank you for having me. After living under 2 years of Assad bombardment and siege, on August 21st, 2013, Assad has launched a sarin gas attack against our town and other towns in eastern Ghouta. I got exposed to sarin gas, and it was the most painful thing I ever been through. I always describe that day as Judgment Day. Men, women, and children were running, screaming, falling on the ground, choking, suffocating without knowing what happened. The burning sensation in my lungs, in my eyes, in my heart is something that I will never forget. But the most painful thing about the memory of that day was holding a little boy who was suffocating and staring in his glassy eyes, in his face that was colored with all colors of terror and fear. And just simply trying to understand, how could anyone do that to someone else? How can you suffocate children? How can you choke them while they're sleeping? How can you bomb and rape and gas hundreds of thousands of people and pretend that you're fighting terrorism while you are the real terrorist? Few days after I survived the attack, I also helped the OPCW when they arrived to Maadamieh to examine the evidence and examine the missiles that the Assad regime has used. And they examined patients. They took blood samples. And gathered data from Maadamieh until the regime started bombing our town again, forcing them to leave. I have total faith in OPCW, and I know they are super professional, and they truly risked their lives back in 2013 to actually investigate that hideous crime against humanity. But unfortunately, all what we got is a broken promise from Obama's red line and a lying deal with the Russians back in 2014, saying that they're going to take Assad chemical weapons stock. 4 years later, 5 years later, thousands of people kept getting killed by chemical weapons, by chlorine gas and sarin gas and mustard gas and God knows what gas, because until now we are not allowed to investigate, to properly investigate the crimes in Syria. 3 days ago, for your dear audience, this is something very important to know. Almost 2 days after the chemical massacre, 3 days ago, Putin sent his military police to Duma, to the same place where it got hit with chemical weapons when they denied the use of chemical weapons. They sent their military police to literally gather and destroy the evidence. My friends inside Duma filmed the Russian military police while they were going to those sites. They also held the doctors who were helping and treating patients during the chemical attack hostage in Damascus. So if someone is listening from the OPCW or from whoever is pretending that they actually care about Syria, why don't you go to the hospitals and look for the doctors of Duma? Why don't you go to the sites and actually try to talk to people away from Assad? There is a lot of patients who got exposed to sarin, and they're now they made it out of to Turkey with the help of some good people. So we have evidence, just like we have evidence over 200 documented use of chemical weapons in Syria. Putin and Assad and Iran are war criminals. They should be held accountable. Otherwise, we're just going to give ISIS another excuse to come and tell people that the West and the international community doesn't care about you and we're the only ones here to help. Inaction in Syria means fueling ISIS 2.0. So with all due respect to idiots like Nigel Farage and others, when Hitler was bombing and gassing and torturing millions of Jews back in World War II, there were voices in the world saying that it didn't happen, or maybe it's not our problem, or maybe we should just move on and send them some aid. And after a devastating war and 70 million people got killed, we learned a valuable lesson. Never again means never again. Never let dictators kill people and commit war crimes unaccountable, because that will send the world into chaos. And the past 7 years, inaction in Syria has helped creating ISIS and fueling extremists, not just in the Middle East. We're seeing the rise of the alt-right in Europe, in the States, all over the world. Extremists are fueling themselves with inaction. It's time for humanity to show criminals like Assad that enough is enough, that it's about time for Assad to be held accountable for his war crimes. There is a crematorium in Sednaya that the U.S. intelligence just announced information about last summer. That crematorium, Assad burned and killed 100,000 people in Sednaya. I've told the U.S. State Department about that site back in 2014 during meetings after I just fled Syria and I managed to escape from the Assad regime and Hezbollah in Lebanon. All what I got is just broken promises and some notes and some just sympathy words. 2 months ago, I was at Ambassador Nikki Haley's office in New York, and I warned her assistants about an upcoming chemical attack because I still have friends on the ground in Syria and also inside the Syrian government who informed me, and they completely
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Kassim, but I've given you an opportunity to explain exactly how you're feeling about a whole range of issues there. One wonders what you would say to the British people, that if they say they completely understand what has happened to you, to those that were near and dear to you, and you've eloquently expressed what has happened to you with the sarin gas attack, and I can see from your heavy breathing just how much, when you remember what happened to you, how it still affects you very deeply. But one wonders, here in the United Kingdom and in other parts of Europe as well, whether, even if these military attacks, if we did see them take place by the United States, by the United Kingdom, and by France, it led to a greater war, if you will, would that be worth it, in your opinion?
Well, with all due respect, leaving, again, dictators unpunished and unchallenged will only fuel extremist groups like ISIS. If we dealt with Assad back in 2011 when millions of Syrians were just asking for democracy and some political freedom, and we could have saved 700,000 lives and millions of refugees and the total existence of terrorist groups like ISIS.